Welcome to the Art and Alchemy Lab, a podcast that explores transformation through creativity. I am your host, Allison Adams. I will be speaking with modern alchemists, artists, healers, and visionaries who have learned to transmute lead into personal growth and spiritual gold. Welcome back, everyone. Today, I'm pleased to introduce my guest, Matthew Ashdown. Matthew is joining me from Vancouver Island in beautiful, supernatural British Columbia, though he spent much of his life growing up in Great Britain, a landscape so rich with the tradition of Arthurian legend and Tolkien's magical worlds. As you'll hear, these stories have left a lasting impression on the way Matthew thinks and works. I know Matthew through our shared work in the Gene Keys and the Dream Arc systems. And while we've had a number of conversations over the years, this is the first time the two of us have actually sat down intentionally to record one. Today, we're exploring myth, storytelling, and spiritual symbolism, touching on themes like the Phoenix, the Alchemical Rubedo, and the Grail myths, and what these stories reveal about personal and collective transformation. It's a rich and wide-ranging conversation, and I hope that you will enjoy it. Let's welcome Matthew to the show. Thank you, Matthew, for joining me today. I really appreciate you coming.
Thank you, Allison. Thanks for the invitation. Looking forward to our conversation.
I know we have a few different things we want to touch on, but I already know that we're going to be going in a very delicious roundabout way through this because you have a lot to offer. Well, let me just say how I first met you. I met you through the Gene Keys community, and maybe you can just tell me a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, what I've done over the years has been changing too, but where I currently reside is I play a role in community engagement management, but I'm also working with a program called the Dream Arc, which we'll probably talk a little bit later about, which infuses the wisdom of the Gene Keys with the world around us and the animals, the creatures that inhabit the spaces that we live in and what we can learn from each other and cohabitate. And so that's something that I'm really passionate about within the work of the Gene Keys. But yeah, holding these spaces, these collective spaces as we do in the Gene Keys community and receiving and hearing the stories and the threads that are weaving through is something that I really love doing within the team. So stories, I think that's what we're here for, an experience of today as well.
Yes. And you are a storyteller and a story collector. I hadn't really thought of saying it that way, but I definitely see you that way. You seem to have access to the archetypal world. I see you as someone who, carries these stories around in your bag sort of and can draw out different meanings in the moment, And I like that because my mind is like that too. Makes life a lot more fun, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It was a great experience.
And also I think storytelling as we go and making stories based on what we're interacting with in our lives and what signs we see and all that. I feel like that is a way to not just have more fun with it, but also get you through the hard times.
Absolutely. That's where my love of mythology comes from, because we see these stories that have spanned across eons, and we see the threads of suffering and the woven into them, and we see the cycles that we move through in humanity, and we can see, though we are taking on a unique guise in this time and place, we can see those archetypal threads and those stories that have woven through, and I find so much beauty in them, and stories too. It's like if I can tell a story, 3 or 4 people could be listening to it and they could each take away something different from it that resonates with their own experience. And so, yeah, yay to storytelling. And
yes, yay to storytelling. So I had wanted you to be on this podcast earlier on. I know I put kind of a soft invitation out to you, like, let's do this sometime. And then I don't know, a month ago or so, you texted me and said that you'd had a dream.
Yeah, that's right. It was a dream that I kept hearing the word Rubedo throughout it. And your face popped up in the dream.
I love that. I feel like one of those TikTokers that gets the sticker face that shows up.
Yeah. When I'm looking at my dreams and I'm being with the dreams, I don't necessarily reach out to everybody that pops into my dreams. For instance, in the work with the Gene Keys, Richard Rudd, who's the founder of it, many people have Richard Rudd dreams, but
Mm.
there's no way he could take all the phone calls or messages from everyone who has a dream about him. But in this situation, I was sitting with it and discerning and just like, yeah, no, I felt like I wanted to reach out to you. And I think it happened that same day, there was something had made that connection when I came online or somewhere, and it was one of your paintings. And it's always your paintings that grab me at these different times. But it opened up to this conversation, and you have this painting of the Phoenix and Rubedo. And
Mm.
so in the dream, I'd kept hearing this word rubedo, which I knew to be a stage of alchemy. I hadn't dived deep into it. And I thought, yeah, Alison, I know she's worked with some of these different stages in this podcast series.
Mhm.
And so I was curious
I was like,
and
no, we
we
have not talked about that one yet. This is perfect.
yeah, awesome. Well, this was the dreams that chose it for
The
us. The
dream
dream
chose it
chose
for
it
us, and
for us.
that's the dream arc, right? You are connected to
Absolutely.
your dreams in many ways. But I'm excited that I'm starting to connect with people's dreams because I don't hear about that much. Yeah, that was unusual for me to hear. But I wanted to talk about this and I wanted to talk to you. So it was very aligned. Now I'm just going to hold this one up here. What do you see here?
The phoenix, this phoenix sitting within this container here, and the story of the phoenix is one that's resonated many a year on my life's journey. And here, connecting it to this reddening, like this, the
Mhm.
color, obviously, and allowing that color to move deep into our consciousness and all that that symbolizes, I think, is really potent, really powerful. And so, with the phoenix, like it's just rising, it's within inside of the darkness there. And doesn't it feel like that at this time that we're in right now, where there just seems to be so much uncertainty, unknown, and yet we can feel times like these become this cauldron for the potential of a collective rebirth that this phoenix represents, the rebirth out of the ashes. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. Well, let me pull up the description that I wrote and we'll see what else comes up.
Yeah, please do.
All right. In order to rise from its own ashes, a phoenix first must burn. Octavia Butler. The fourth and final alchemical operation is called the rubedo, or reddening. The color red was associated with both gold and the elusive philosopher's stone and marks the alchemist's success and completion of the magnum opus, or the great work. It is also the color of blood, which represents coming back to life as passionate, perfectly, imperfectly human. Psychologically, this is what Jung called individuation, when a person has integrated elements of the conscious and unconscious mind and accepts themselves as a separate and unique whole, warts and all. As we can see through the many previous stages of the work, it's no easy process and it reoccurs and cycles through a lifetime. The phoenix, mythic bird of fire, is the bird that represents the rubedo. Many traditions share the story of this magnificent creature who burns in flames and then rises from the ashes, renewed and rejuvenated again and again. The wisdom of the phoenix is transferred forward at every new cycle, and though the bird may have to start again, it is never starting from scratch. Nothing is wasted. This is important to remember as the end of a process is simply the beginning of a new one. The rubedo is a sign that you are coming back to life. Not the life that you knew before, but a different version of yourself. Every turn is more glorious than the one before. To be accepting and gracious in yourself is the gold. It may even be the purpose of your whole life.
I love that. I love that. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, so much to launch off of within
Yeah,
there.
well, that's me. I don't know how to
Seems
keep it
lots.
simple. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, no, it's simple. Like there was a thread through there that we could definitely work with today. I'm sure of it. Yeah.
Well, I think it goes back to what we were saying before. We have all those different stories, and you're like, oh, they're all good. Give me three of them. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
In the same
Yeah.
sentence.
Yeah. Well, the first thing that pops into my mind actually is just sharing there is my own creative writing process at the moment. And I've been working with a book coach, just writing a story. And at this time, it's gone through different guises, I guess you could say, along the way. And just recently, there was this sense of like, I was writing and it was moving in a particular direction and it was feeling really good. And then it reached this point where it wasn't quite feeling as right in that direction anymore. And yet, so many amazing synchronicities had come my way and insights and experiences. So there was an absolute rightness in what I was experiencing there. And at the same time, in my writing, essentially, I was writing about Egypt. And Egypt is a place that I've studied throughout my life, but I haven't been there. And when it's in my creative writing, when I've walked and breathed and stood on land and I felt it in my bones, I can write it really clearly. But when I've only read about it through other people's, it's kind of coming through a secondary sense that way. And so I was feeling this kind of disconnection in a way. And so I reoriented and was moving the writing back to the lands that I am familiar with Wales and England and even Canada and even France, parts of Europe that are places that I've been that I've set foot on. So there was a complete rewrite needing to be done. But like you said, in all of that, there was very many elements of it that continue forward. Like the ways the characters had developed, I felt really happy with those. And so those characters are still those characters, but they're in this new scenery.
You moved it out of Egypt into another area that like you could connect with the land without
Exactly.
some kind
Yeah.
of performative secondary sense.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was noticing it in my writing that I was writing these places and I was like, it was a lot of conversational pieces, but where's the experience of the land? And for mythology and stories, they grow through, in many ways, it's the land speaking through us. So to be in this land where I am now, to be in the lands where I've been before, and to allow that to be a part of my expression in my creativity, it definitely, it makes a lot of sense for me. And so there is that rebirth of the story in a sense, but still drawing upon much of what was
Like the
garnered.
phoenix, kind of still bringing forward the wisdom that you had learned.
Yeah.
So let's go back to your roots, because I
Mhm.
think that can lead us to my next question. Um,
Okay.
so just give me a little detail. You weren't born in Canada.
Yeah, I was born in the UK, lived in the UK till I was 22. Lost my English accent. That's one of the things that has happened. Although I did live in Canada between the age of 3 and 6, formative years, I think. My mum came to England from Canada, met my
Mm,
dad, and then, we tried here in Canada a bit, but then we moved back to England. So all my schooling years were in
mhm,
England. And then I reached the age of 22, finished university, and I was just like, this isn't where I want to be. And the forests of Canada had always called me,
mm,
and originally I lived in towns and cities around Vancouver Island, but now I live in the forests that I dreamed of when I was a young
mhm.
boy. And
They have a
so,
lot of like ancient growth up there, don't they, still?
yeah, yeah, not too far from here, there's a place called Fairy Creek. And, there's a lot of activism for protecting these
Hmm.
ancient growth trees because there's a lot of logging here on Vancouver Island.
Yeah. Yeah.
We commune. I've got my 6 grandmother trees on the backyard here that watch over this home, and I commune with them daily, and they connect to the other trees around the area. So it's
Oh, I can
got
feel
a,
that in my heart.
got
I
a,
love
we got
that.
a
I'm
nice
like,
little
mm,
family
that's really
together.
cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're connected to both countries. Let's go back to England now because, well, we have similarity there. You never met Vernon, but I was like your mom, right? I'm the one that went over and married someone in England.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And then, we'll see where the kids end up eventually. But we came back here. I've talked to you a little bit about Vernon. I think I introduced you to him when we first met, maybe because of the
Got a
British
picture.
thing. Yeah. Yeah. It's nice because I feel like you've met him.
Hmm. Yeah. I can see a picture in my mind's eye because you
Yeah.
shared a picture with me. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I have a lot of British, or I should say English DNA, or British Isles DNA, whatever they want to call that, like very high. At least it used to be really high. I'm not sure if it's gone down now because they changed a little bit, but it was like 95%, like
Mm-hmm.
white, very. And then the other ones were very white also. It was a little bit kind of disappointing, but I guess, that's how it is with the Puritans that went to America. They just didn't mix it. Anyway, it's always caused me to feel very tied to that place. Even when I was young and I would go to England and I would visit, and I went to college there for a time, and I just always felt like I knew I wouldn't get lost. Felt very
Hmm.
safe there. And I still have that feeling when I go there. Now I understand maybe it is because I have some strong DNA to the place. Or maybe it was because my destiny was tied to it, because, to have children that were
Mm.
from there too and stay connected. But one thing that you brought to the table was your Grail quests. And I still haven't really understood it all, but I'm so fascinated about that kind of mythology because with all of this English stuff in me, how did I miss out on really
Mm.
knowing those stories of the round table and all those things?
Yeah.
So tell me
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay. I love it. Yeah. Joseph Campbell talked about this as being one of the main influencing mythologies of the Western world. It also really depends on where we land within it, because I was kind of resistant to it for a long time, actually, in my 20s. I was raised in Catholicism, and when I was about 16 or 17, I stepped away from Catholicism. And in the years following that, things came my way around these Grail quests, but I still was reacting to the religious kind of influence on those stories, because a lot of the Grail myth stories that are well known and influential today in many ways are from that medieval period, 1100, 1200s. And written by clerics or poets that were writing them in a time when there was a very clear perspective on the feminine, for instance. So a lot of the Grail myths contain deep feminine wisdom that is cloaked in symbolism. And it was almost like it was treated as entertainment by the masses, but those who knew and felt it at a deeper level felt it at a deeper level. And
Mm-hmm.
I've experienced that with other stories. I remember as a child experiencing them as entertainment, and now they're offering deep revelation,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so, always fascinated by the Knights of the Round Table, but it was really in my late 20s, and I would sit and meditate. I can remember myself in the room at one point, and as I was meditating, I just dropped into the silence and I heard this name come forth. And I was like, I don't know that name. The name was Galahad. And Galahad is one of these knights of the Round Table. And he is the one that was kind of seen as the purest of the pure. Like, he was one of the three ultimate Grail winners. So I just began to invite Galahad in as this archetype, offering me guidance at that time in my life. And so I would read the stories of Galahad. I wouldn't read them all because there's so many of them, but I would read these stories of Galahad and see how it was part of my journey in that time of transformation, and where I was holding myself up to unrealistic expectations of self and things like that. And then as the years transpired, it was almost like different characters emerged out of the unconscious for me and were just like, hey, pay attention to me now, give me a look. Right now, through conversations with other friends too, but Robin Hood is really making a resurgence in my life as somebody that I
Mm-hmm.
explored and worked with as a young boy, read books about him. And is now emerging as this symbolic green man, if you like, that represented so much of the rejected, the outlaw,
Yeah.
right? In so many ways. And so the Grail mysteries, I just began to deepen into them and I began to open up to, okay, even if this comes with some religious conditioning, I can be discerning about it as I approach it, but also I can be, inviting in the
Mm-hmm.
transformational motifs
Mm-hmm.
that are there within it. And this is something that people like Campbell would say, or Marion Woodman, or others that have worked with this deep mythology. But over time, what happened as well is, especially when I was working with the dream arc creatures, there's many animals that show up in these mythologies, and they all are in some way a portal creature. They take
Mm-hmm.
us into other realms. It actually pulled me even deeper back. My parents ended up moving to a place in Wales. It's about 10 miles from where the stones from Stonehenge came from. It's called the Preseli Hills. And for me, it is such a gift that that's where they've moved, because when I can go and visit with them, I just go and wander these hills.
I love Wales. It's the secret jewel of the whole place.
It absolutely is. And it's where a lot of these Grail stories actually
That makes sense.
originated.
I can picture the scenery in those stories
Yeah,
because I've been
yeah,
there.
yeah, absolutely. Well, even like Percival was based on a Welsh character, and along the way, you've heard their names transforming slightly, but each of these characters represent some kind of alchemical journey that we as individuals, whether we're male or female, like there's something in the alchemical wisdom of Percival and his character, and Dindrain, his sister, offers elements of contemplation on the feminine within. So they each
Mhm.
represent aspects of my psyche in some way, or anybody's psyche, and we can sort of experience them in different ways in our own life at different
Mhm.
times. Yeah. And then maybe we'll talk about it later, but how Galahad, Percival, and the other one is Bors, they each achieved the Grail, but they all played very different roles with it after achieving it, symbolic of the different ways each of us can approach the Grail in our lifetimes.
Our
Yeah.
own hero's journey according to
Yeah.
what each is invited to find or
Yeah.
why each one is looking for that.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
Basically, medieval stories.
Yeah, medieval, but then going back to a lot of the older Celtic tales were
Mhm.
told orally, they weren't written down,
And so they
right? And
grew
so,
into this other story,
yeah, exactly.
like seeing the same things in Egypt and seeing the same
Right.
thing in
Yeah,
Mexico and seeing the
exactly.
same,
Yeah,
we all
yeah.
think it's
Thanks.
just our thing. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Yeah.
interesting. Have you actually quested to any of these other places? I mean, now you're talking about the Stonehenge stones,
Mm.
which is fascinating, but there's other pilgrimages that often people that follow these archetypes will take. Have you done any of those, like in France or anything?
Yeah, France. I was just thinking about that yesterday, actually. It wasn't in preparation for this or any reason, but I revisited the Da Vinci Code by Dan Brown,
Hmm?
which, as much as it's entertainment as well, there's like a lot of morsels of
A lot of
really good
code in
stuff.
there.
Literally. And that really set me off. In many ways, it healed my relationship with Catholicism too, in a sense. Well, it healed my relationship, but to some extent, but it also helped explain some of the wounding that was still there, in the sense that it was opening up to this whole other sort of relationship to Mary Magdalene. Mary Magdalene was somebody that when I was in school, all we ever heard about with her was she was a prostitute. That's
Right.
all we ever learned, right? As were most of the women in the Bible. They were just put in that position that way. So when that came out and the movie came out in, I think, in 2006, it really started me off on this whole other kind of journey. And then when I met my wife in 2012, we just wanted to go travel for a bit. I'm really glad we did that all those years ago. We did 3 months where we traveled around. And we would have so many synchronicities because for both of us, the synchronicities when we travel, it's quite unbelievable. And a lot of them around kind of these Grail Quest stories. And so when I was in France, we visited Rennes-le-Château, which is a place that historically has been associated with the Grail for sure. And I'm always like, there's this discernment piece as well in all of this. There's the stories, the historical stories, and then there's the mythological elements to them. And to enjoy both of them to
Mhm.
the extent that I do. So going around France, we didn't make it to Montségur.
Languedoc.
Yeah, in the
Yeah,
Languedoc.
that's
We went to Carcassonne, which is where there was some real battles back in the day when the Cathars were resisting the attacks of the Catholics, that were just wiping them out, the Albigensian Crusade that wiped out the Cathars, that kind of heresy, as they were calling it, that is still felt so deeply in the psyche today. For any of us that have resonated with the archetype of the heretic, we're probably drawn to the stories of those
Mhm.
Cathars in some way.
Yeah, I didn't really know much about this. I got married in 2006. I knew about the book, the Da Vinci Code, but
Oh
I
yeah,
just didn't really get
yeah.
into it. But then in 2006, I married Vernon, and he was really into the Cathars. He considered himself a Gnostic, or at least if he called himself anything, it would have been like that kind of a version of Christian, I guess. I was like, okay, that's interesting. And we were both 6'2s. That's a human design thing. You understand it. And it's a personality type, sort of. What was cool about that is we gave each other a lot of room for our own things. And we also loved being together and talking about creativity and sharing things, but we never expected the other person to really be on board with our own thing. But there's a
Yeah.
lot that he had mentioned that I was like, okay, that's kind of cool. You seem to like it. And then more and more a little interested, but it wasn't my thing. And then after he died, of course, like all those things became my thing. I sometimes feel like I didn't get
Yeah,
any
yeah.
financial inheritance from him, but I got kind of a road that he had already gone down. And then I got to pick up where he left off, sort of,
Wow.
in
Neat.
lots of
Yeah.
ways. In fact, he, I would say, brought me even to Joseph Campbell, and, well, I guess Jung stuff, and then going into the Dream Arc and the Gene Keys where I met you, and being really open to all of these stories, but realizing I had been listening and I didn't realize I'd been listening.
It sounds like it for sure.
Yeah, yeah. It's like a way of honoring him still, is finding my own interest in those things. I
Yeah.
feel like if he had a past life, it always felt like that would be where he probably was, one of those lives, because he seemed to have this almost a memory of the place. And there's times that I've had sort of dreams and visions where I also have that, but I don't know, it could have just been where he, put it in my mind. We were going to go down there for our 10th anniversary. That was our plan. I was kind of more interested in the Chateauneuf de Pop that they have there. They have really good wine there, and he could go to his stories and we both do our thing. In the end, we never made it there. And actually, our 10th anniversary was his memorial service.
Oh,
So
wow.
there's a weird thing talking to you about this now, too, because it's kind of bringing in, I feel like
Yeah.
he's in my heart, like wanting to connect with you.
You stepping into this conversation. My wife is a practicing medium, and I haven't, even though I come from a lineage of mediums, which I discovered once I met my wife.
The English are kind of big on that, aren't they? They don't
Yeah,
admit it, but they
absolutely.
are.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not definitely not all circles.
I think it's part of the environment there too,
Yeah,
not just the people. It's what's in the history of the land that
yeah. The
causes
land
people to be more
household.
psychic.
Yes, absolutely. That green and pleasant land makes me
Mm.
think of that word, the viriditas, right? It's that
Yes,
deep
greening.
green.
The
Yeah.
greening, we have the
Yes.
reddening and then the
Yeah,
greening.
that's right. We're veering off topic. Well, I am red-green colorblind.
Really, you're colorblind? I wore this red shirt for you and you can't even tell.
I still see it as what I feel is red, although I have no proof you're seeing the same color. Yeah. Because mediumship is discussed in our home and life, it's like, although I don't communicate in the way my wife does, I feel a real presence when there are connections. And as we're talking about Vernon, and I do feel like he's somebody that I would have been able to enjoy a good sit down and conversation with. And so his love of the path of Gnosticism and the Cathars. And like you said, I think it's where it's helped me have a different relationship with Christ and the teachings of Christ. And Christ obviously being the phoenix rising out of the ashes and the
Mm.
story of his resurrection, especially in this world today, where there's so many different kinds of Christianity. There's 5,000 different kinds. And for the longest time, it was really difficult for me to speak.
Mm.
This is my connection to Christianity. There's still some people in my life that I can't talk to necessarily about the Magdalene connection because, it's still met with resistance in many parts. And yet it's been such a deep part of my own healing journey in recognizing both what people have called maybe the masculine and feminine Christ, but just that these images of Mary and Jesus together in sacred union, bringing a whole other level of contemplation to my relationship to the Christ. And, what that means in a world today where we're seeing the rise of white Christian nationality and things like that.
It
Yeah,
seems
it's
so counter the
yeah,
message, doesn't it? Well, it is counter
absolutely.
the message. Yeah, let's just call it
Definitely.
what it is. But that's a tricky place for me too. I suffered from spiritual abuse. And um, it's something that in my own individuation process, I feel coming in, I feel that sort of Christ consciousness is something that so many people talk about in a really beautiful way. And then also in my own communities that I've grown up in, people talk about Christ being this, warrior with a gun. It's heavy for me. at a really
Mhm.
deep level. When I was a kid, my parents taught me to believe in Jesus, and I was also really scared of the dark. I couldn't ever call out when I get scared. And I think being able to see things in the dark is part of that gift that you and I are talking about, that ability to kind of see those figures that were scary as kids, but over time you master it and realize you can use that. But as a kid, to feel alone in it and call my parents, and they'll be like, we just have to call to Jesus. And I would imagine Jesus being in the bedroom with my parents, like their favorite child. I was
Mhm.
like, I need you to come.
Uh,
It was almost like he was like a big brother or something. But I think it touches on some of these wounds start when you're so young that as we get older, we're like, I want that story. That's really attractive to me. I love the way Matthew's talking about that. And yet it hurts to move towards that
mm,
sometimes because you're still making peace with your own individuation, I guess.
yeah. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I share the experiences of sitting at the top of the stairs, being afraid in the dark and seeing things there. And my mom, instead of praying to Jesus, used to get mad at me. Again, I feel it is just what we're exposed to, isn't it? For me, it was almost like God was the one I was afraid of, and Jesus was the one I could turn to.
Good cop,
Soften the
bad cop a little
blow.
bit.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So he saved us from our sins, and then God won't punish us. So
Yeah.
but
Wow.
definitely understanding that for me, that word God used to have such a charge to it. And, it was a real avoidance of it. And Jesus can have that same. And I can still hear when people say Jesus is the way, it's like I understand where people are coming from and saying that at the same time, when it's a limited understanding of what Jesus is according to their idea of Jesus. You and I have both encountered the gene keys, and the gene keys for me is a way of being able to see that we all walk such very different
Yeah,
paths. This Hindu saying that there's so many ways up to the top of the mountain, the only one wasting their time is telling everybody else they're going the wrong way.
I like
And
that.
so it's like, even in that relationship with Jesus, it's like I found my way through it through my own alchemical journey, but other people will have their own ways. And like I say, I feel a stronger relationship to Mary Magdalene now, right?
Mhm.
And it partly could be because of how I see Jesus's name being used in the
Mhm.
world in a way that does not resonate for me,
Right.
you
You
know?
kind of want something you have a little fresher relationship with that doesn't have
Hmm.
all the baggage.
Yeah. Sorry, Jesus. I mean, love you.
The Mary Magdalene thing too, I'm seeing more women in America picking up on that because I have a friend that leads Camino trails
Oh,
with
yeah.
women. And along those trails, they're learning about Mary Magdalene and starting to bring that into their walks and interest and everything, and then coming back and recognizing, oh, this really fits with what's going on with my awareness of how I've been treated in my family as a woman, or the way that my girls are always going to be in danger if they, are in certain circles or whatever. I'm finding that to be really interesting that in this moment, I'm seeing a lot more in the States interest in her.
Mhm.
And that's pretty removed from the European stuff that we're talking about.
Yeah, yeah. It's like you don't have to study all that stuff to have that relationship with her. And I think sometimes people can get caught up on the historical aspect of it. Like even in the Da Vinci Code, you're finding where her bones are. No, I'm finding her within my own bones.
Mm. Yeah, you
Not
don't have to take it literally. In fact, you probably
exactly.
shouldn't.
Right. As soon as we do, we're defending our version of history,
Or we're
you know.
digging, 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 looking for the right bones to dig up. And it's not really
Yeah,
your job to dig up the bones.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So it hasn't been a straight journey at all
Hmm.
with it. It's that meandering, and even just talking out loud about that relationship, even to Jesus, and what that means and how it changes and evolves over time. When there's periods of life where I'm
Yeah.
fully with him and present, and other times where somebody else is stepping forward. Right now, it feels like Mary.
Isn't she known for red?
Yes, she was the Scarlet Woman. Yes.
She was the
Yeah, the red,
reddening.
yeah, it was definitely the reddening there. A lot of paintings depict her. Well, of course, they depict her as white, which I don't believe she was at all, being
From the Middle
some.
East. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. She was depicted as red-haired, so there's this real red hair connection.
I would like to ask you about the artwork. If you've come to decide what you want to share.
Yeah, and when we think of artwork and the stories, the one that was really coming up for me this morning it's been with me my whole life. It's been a story that has moved me, and I see how it's a story that has moved many others as well, and in different ways, is The Lord of the Rings by Tolkien. Tolkien's stories always spoke to me as a kid. I was reading them, especially when I was in hospital for 6 weeks at one point in my life, 2 weeks of that in intensive care, and
My
it was a real,
gosh.
that was my kind of like real awakening moment. I was 14 at the time. It was a moment in life that really got me to question everything. But I would read The Lord of the Rings because I had lots of time in the hospital bed, and just the stories of like the perseverance and the overcoming of struggle that speaks so deeply throughout that. And then, of course, when the movies came out in the early 2000s, like really feeling that surge, not just in myself, but in the people around me in the community, and people that may not have read the books even were coming to them and finding this new passion for them. And his work has always been Grail oriented. He was
Mhm.
heavily influenced by the Grail mysteries, and instead of a Grail, he's got the ring,
The
the one
ring.
ring. And but at the very end
Oh,
of
that's
that
so
story,
interesting.
it's thrown into the fire. The ring is cast back
Hmm.
into Mount Doom, into the fire from which it originated many moons before. And I have a particular love of the Four Inklings, which is Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, and then others that came and went as well. Charles Williams and Owen Barfield, just like these great minds that would sit, and they all came from very different, diverse backgrounds, different kind of what we've been talking about here, different relationships to Christ. Tolkien was very much a Catholic and kind of opposed to some of Owen Barfield's ideas and things like that, but they would have healthy conversations.
Must have
Logs
been
that were
so
really,
intelligent to be able to have those healthy conversations. Because imagining people doing that now, it seems like you have to have a high level of intelligence to be able to
absolutely.
maintain interest in each other's ideas when they're coming from.
Yeah, I know that C.S. Lewis would, Owen Barfield was always talking about Rudolf Steiner. At one point, C.S. Lewis is like, I don't want to hear that name again. I am so done with the name Rudolf Steiner. And so they would have these things, and the influence would come through in the writing, the creative writing, and just that space for alchemy in the cauldron of these different perspectives and opinions, and yet having such a good bond and connection because
Mhm.
they did come from quite different influences and different aspects of Christianity and relationship to paganism too and the world. Like when I think of Tolkien, he didn't really portray animals much in his stories, whereas somebody like Lewis, his whole thing was
Oh,
based
and there's the dream
on
arc, right? I grew
very
up on
dreamy.
those stories. It was very much
Yeah,
of the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And
yeah,
actually, there is a C.S. Lewis quote. I think a child had written to him about how he loved Aslan and he felt better about Aslan than God or something like that, or Aslan than Jesus. I can't remember, but he said, that's okay. I think he'd appreciate that you would talk to Aslan or
yeah,
something like that. And it was
yeah.
so generous. And it kind of brings me back to that child place. And also, I struggled with prayer after Vernon died too. And had to really look at what I believed about God and stuff during that time. And
Mm,
I still, I'm not sure about all the names I have. I use the word life a lot for my word
mhm,
for God because that's the thing that I feel closest to. But my therapist at the time, I was struggling. I was like, I don't know. Like, I just sort of had these beliefs, and now I don't see it that way. I don't know if I can keep believing in God. And
mm,
she said, well, can you talk to Vernon? And I was like, yeah, I can talk to Vernon. She goes, well, I think that's fine. Anything
mhm.
you can do to get your prayers out,
Yeah,
anything you can do to get your heart out. And it taught me, well, it taught me to talk to Vernon. But it's so funny because even through this, it's like this swinging back to the same things, isn't it? And we are individuating. We're trying to be the part of ourself that comes back each time with more wisdom, more hope, new, fresh eyes. And yet we've had to die to something in order to get to that next place. And then which parts are going to stay with you? And I mean, I'm in my middle life, so I'm in my 50s now, and I'm hearing that from a lot of women my age. It's like, what's going on in our bodies and what's going on in our minds and what's going on in our world. And it's just remembering that Phoenix is like, yeah, this is the upgrade. This is the upgrade. because we might be older and we might, not have the innocence that we had when we were young, but also we don't have to be afraid of the dark. There's so many good things that we have gotten through all of these stories that we've lived.
hmm Yeah, and Tolkien was actually one who really spoke out in relation to the sort of dumbing down of fairy tales, because it was in some of the darkest fairy tales that, we would learn to enter into the mystery of life.
Mhm.
And that also that fairy tales were never meant to be exclusively for children too, that they were for all of us. And so the fairy tales, the myth, they definitely have supported me in this embrace of the darkness
Mhm.
within me, and the darkness that I experience in my day-to-day life. And it's very rare that I have conversations outwardly with the name God in it. There's still a level of discomfort
Yeah.
in there for
Hmm.
me, because there were times when I would sit with people who did talk about it, but then it was like, oh no, you're wrong about that. You're wrong about this. And it was like, I'm holding my own
Right, right.
experience here, you
Yeah.
know?
Which is why when we think of things mythologically and we name things being mythologies, like I'm comfortable with talking about sacred texts as mythology.
hmm
They're sacred
Yeah.
mythologies. They're
Yeah.
sacred stories, but in all our cultures we have them, and we're all, depending on how you're taught, also how your brain works. Each child has a different brain that processes differently too, and some see very black and white. And they
That's
need to see things as this is what it looks like, this is exactly true, this is how it happened. I don't really care about all the details of how it got to my ears. This is
mm,
it. And then some of us need a lot of variety in order to feel safe in the world. Black and white doesn't make you feel safe. There's all those different things we have too.
yeah.
So we're always trying, I think, I mean, hopefully trying to bring what we believe is best to the table, but remembering that all of these stories are going to connect with a different picture, just kind of like your color blindness. We can speak these things, but at the end of the day, you're imagining it in a different color than I am.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know how different.
And maybe nobody does. And the whole time, I think I'm saying the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. We've got nothing to measure it against there. So it's interesting being diagnosed as colorblind. And I think this piece about perception and stories too is really interesting, because I think of the ways that stories and myths have been used for both good and in the name of justifying evil, right? Like even today, there are white nationalists who just are all over Tolkien's material and using it. They're calling things this and that based on Tolkien's
Mhm.
work. I
Oh,
think of
that
the
kind of
Bhagavad.
hurts, doesn't it?
It does, yes. And I remember this again was Campbell years ago, because I would always have this hesitancy about speaking up and sharing my stories because of that possibility of being misunderstood and it being misconstrued. This was way before I ever even learned shadow work, or before the gene keys. And he was just talking about whenever we put something out into the world, there's always going to be that element of darkness that surrounds it in some way. Gandhi was somebody who was a real proponent for the Bhagavad Gita. It was under his arms. I think you can
Mm.
even see pictures of it where he's carrying it under his arms as this like guidance for him in his campaigns of speaking for truth. Even Gandhi, he had his darkness too. But at the same time, somebody else who walked with the Bhagavad Gita and also studied the Grail mythologies and built Grail castles was Heinrich Himmler, the leader of the SS. Yeah, again,
Mm.
taking the same stories, viewing it through a certain level of perception and taking it out into the world in a way that just was from their level of consciousness. And it's just eye-opening in that way. It's like, wow, whoever first
Mm.
channeled through the Bhagavad Gita had to let go of their attachment to what that became,
Yeah.
because how were they to know that 2,000, 5,000, however many, I should know that, how old the Bhagavad Gita is, but I'm not sure, years later that it would be misused in that way,
Mhm.
right? And
That you can
I,
say the same thing with, the evangelical church in America right now. It's painful. It's painful for a lot of people because a lot of good stuff has happened in those communities, but then
yeah.
also a lot of bad stuff is happening and has been happening. So we're all kind of coming into this awareness that there's, wow, so many different ways of looking at things. And I
Mhm.
think finding
Mhm.
people to talk this out with, like with you, it's such a nice reminder that there's also people that just stay curious.
Yeah. Yeah. Curiosity, isn't it? Right? I could come and just look at my neighbor and decide this is who they are based upon what I see. I've been blown away in my life when I've allowed myself to be curious in that way and
Mm-hmm.
inquire. I realized that there were people on my doorstep or very close to it that were nothing like what I expected.
Right. Right. And that should give us the freedom to also continue to change our minds about some of the things that we assumed, even about ourselves,
Yeah,
religion
absolutely.
and all those things. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, one more thing. Do you have Gene Key 11 in your chart?
It's not one that I have in my chart. In fact, it's one I've looked at activations from asteroids. I've looked at the star activations. 11 is not in there anywhere. It's like
Maybe it's just
completely
something you
absent.
don't have to work through. It's just naturally. Sometimes like in astrology, they say if you have houses without anything in it, it's fine. There's no
Yeah,
real
yes.
issues for you there. It's
It's
kind
not
of
my one blood
natural. You don't
sign.
have to
Yeah,
deal with the shadows as much, maybe, because
yeah,
it's not being lit up all the time.
yeah.
But
But I resonate the idea of archetypes in the dream world. It's like I'm working with the dream arc, which is working with our dreams, is such a big part of that. It feels like it comes to me from the world around me.
yeah,
So,
yeah, you can move through it very easily and around it probably. I have that as, in my purpose key. So it's an unconscious thing that's there all the time. And it has to do with basically seeing images in the dark
I've, I
and
got a very
creating
close shaman friend that
idealistic flow out of these stories. And I believe the bird that's attached to it is connected with the phoenix
the
in the
pheasant.
dream arc.
Yeah,
So I thought that was kind of cool how this conversation went in and out of all those different storytelling places. But you're a natural, and I learned so much from you just today.
thanks for a really fun conversation.
And thanks,
Yeah.
Vernon, for coming in.
Vernon? I didn't realize there's gonna be three of us today. It's
Well,
great.
his birthday's coming up soon, so he's on the mind.
What's
So
his birthday?
February
End of
2nd,
Okay, right, February 2nd.
he's an Aquarius.
And
So,
February the 2nd is the date that we actually, in the I Ching calendar, we've been in the season of lake, and we move into the element of fire on February the 2nd.
oh, really? And we're
Yes.
moving into a fire year on the 17th of February with the Lunar New Year and the fire
Yeah.
horse.
Yeah.
So,
There we
I love the idea of fire bringing a lot of light also,
Yeah,
helping
yeah.
us see. Yeah,
Could I share a poem? I
please
have
do. Yeah.
this is from Richard Rudd, and it's on Rubedo.
Okay.
And I thought maybe we can just take it as our contemplation to
Yeah.
walk away with.
Let's
But
do it.
gaze deep into the embers of the fire, and you will mark your own future. The rose gold glow of a burnished soul, returning resplendent to the whole. And that's it.
Beautiful. That's a perfect
Yeah,
place to stop.
that's what I was feeling. A nice way to pull it all together.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Why don't you read it one more time?
Gaze deep into the embers of the fire, and you will mark your own future. The rose gold glow of a burnished soul, returning resplendent to the whole.
Mm. Well, I'm going to take that with me and thank you for expanding my heart today
Thank you for
and
having me.
joining me.
A beautiful conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, I hope we talk again soon.
Yes.
Thank you. We'll say goodbye. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of Art and Alchemy Lab. If you enjoyed what you heard, please take a moment to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. Your likes, shares, and reviews help this podcast to reach more people, and it means the world to have your support. Until next week, stay curious, everyone.